What's going on, everybody? This is Daryl Andrews again, Coach D, coming to you with some information that I think could be helpful in your business, in your corporation, your nonprofit, your workforce development organization, your school district, whatever capacity you work in. Um, Recently I've mentioned we've been doing a lot of live programs, and yesterday I had a chance to spend an amazing time with a tremendous team in Memphis, Tennessee. And KLF, if you see this, just want to say you and your team at Workforce Mid-South are just amazing. I really, really enjoyed my time there. But I'm back up in our office in the East Coast. We now have multiple locations. And this was really thinking about, had time to kind of process a little bit about what yesterday in our day and the conversations that we had and the training that took place. It was just a powerful, powerful day. And we've been seeing a lot of that all over the country with various organizations that we've been working with. And, today, in today's society, we have this thing where we're looking at this whole big challenge of the great resignation. And everyone, I mean, you hear about some of the organizations out here that literally have hundreds of job openings that they can't fill. It's still happening months after this quote unquote post pandemic period has kicked in. And so when you work in this field, okay, hey, Tisha, my friend, hope all is well. And, we've been doing a lot of work in your state recently with this whole self care piece. It's been phenomenal. So, it's been a great experience, but as always, good to see you on here. And glad to see that Facebook is allowing it, because the reality is Facebook has not been allowing comments. And so, Tisha, we're gonna show you a little love, put you up on here so folks can see you. She's a phenomenal leader in Southern Maryland in the workforce development space. And so we know that there's been some challenges, and people are trying to figure out this great resignation. How do we deal with it? But let me tell you what I've noticed, and this is really interesting because I've had a chance to interact with a lot of leaders post pandemic. And what I found is that what we're finding, and it's not just me, it's myself, it's Pierre Campbell, who many of you know, and others who are involved with the work that we're doing. A lot of people are trying to lead like it was pre-pandemic. So leading the way we used to lead. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because this is a whole nother message around leading. All right. And yeah. Yeah. And so on leading during a time of post-pandemic, it's a different leadership model, a different leadership style. And so we got to understand it's different. So, but what I want to talk about today is really the culture of your organization, because when we talk about the great resignation that's taking place, we can't ignore the fact that people over the last couple of years have been traumatized by what took place with this pandemic. Obviously being in home for months and dealing with families, challenges, and things that's going on with our kids, and it was rough, man. I mean, and my children, one of them was not able to have their graduation from high school, and another one did not have the graduation from college. So it's like, because of the pandemic, and everybody had to come home. We were trying to figure this thing out, 6 months, whatever. And then beyond that, just the fear of the virus, and thank goodness that many of us got vaccinated. So I caught the thing, and it didn't really bother me that bad because of the vaccine. So people can say what they want. I'm glad I did, because I lost several friends to this virus. So call it what you want. I'm just glad my children and my family didn't have to bury me because of it. Okay. So this whole thing of the great resignation, here's the deal. You got to ask yourself the question, when it comes to the culture of my organization, if you're a leader, is there consistency or are there gaps? All right. Think about that. Is there consistency or are there gaps? because as a leader, one of the goals of leadership, okay, is to shape the culture of your organization. Every organization or work that I've ever led, it was my responsibility, including this company we have here, to shape, okay, to shape the culture of my organization. And so if I'm a leader and I've never been taught to shape a culture or how to motivate people, essentially, I used to work in sales and marketing for a big Fortune 30 company. And it used to always frustrate me that they promote someone based upon, let's say, sales performance. And I would always say, man, just because a person is a good salesperson, it doesn't mean they're going to be a great leader. That's a totally different skill set. And it showed itself time and time again where people had phenomenal sales numbers, but they could not inspire other people to do the same, nor could they inspire other people to do anything because they didn't know how to lead people. And so as a leader, the one thing you want to look at within your organization, and we talked to this in diversity space, we talk about it in workforce development space, team building, core values, all the things we talk about, is really what can we do as a leadership team to build continuity in our culture so that no matter where a customer or even one of our workers interact, there's a consistency in the way we interact. Anybody out there agree with me on that? Do you understand? If you know what I'm talking about, just kind of chime in. You could put some post here if I can see it. I don't know again if I can see it or not because Harrison, it's not Facebook. This is StreamYard. And StreamYard will not, it's sometimes it lets posts go through and sometimes it doesn't. I don't get it, but that's just the way it is. So I can't always, there's people that post I see later after this when I go to my streams and Facebook and all that, but I can't see it through StreamYard. So I'm still trying to figure that out. But do you understand what I mean by culture? How many of you out there have a culture in your company that you work for that you love? All right. What are some of the things that that make that a culture that you love? Now, I've asked that question before, right? And I find that very few people respond, yeah, we got a great culture. But if actually another question, how many of you guys out there got cultures that are like makes your stomach turn? Or I don't feel like going to work today, thank God it's Friday, and you start realizing, man, folks here hate going to that job. Well, you see, yeah, okay, then not perfect. Yeah, and it happens. All right. So the thing about it is, that leaders should always be evaluating the culture of the organization. Because if there's gaps, like, a gap that causes a customer to become dismayed with your organization, guess what? That you can lose that customer, then that customer goes tells 50 people, and then you just lost 50 people. Or a gap that impacts an employee in such a way the employee feels like, I don't even feel valued here. It's just about getting the job done and things like that. And so the reality is we have to ask ourselves the question, and it's a great question. What kind of culture do we want? All right. And I'm going to give you a few things too, because these are things we talk about all the time. So I'm just going to share a few things that I think can help. What kind of culture? Now, it starts with the leaders. If I want a culture within my organization, you see, yeah, okay, yeah, right. Mm-hmm. And so if I am trying to build a culture, all right, I'm trying to build a culture. It's important to understand it starts with me. What kind of leader am I? So, like Harrison, I see some of the things that you're saying here, and you're right. We got to get the job, get the job done. Okay, you see, and so the reality is, like what you're saying now, is mutual respect and integrity to work with each other. We need to have that. We need to look at, are we working on the ways we can better make the connection to engage in people so that we can get the job done, as you're saying in your post? Because the reality is we're dealing with human beings. We're not dealing with machines. Now, I know a lot of companies going to the robot mode where everybody's, they're just building these robots to run different, assembly line things like that. But when you're dealing with people, You're dealing with human beings. And so, and when you're talking about building a culture, you got to know how to deal with big people. Now, if you're going to have a bunch of robots, then fine. You don't need to do what I'm talking about. Just throw it in the garbage can. It doesn't make sense. But if you're going to deal with people with different personalities, different walks of life, different backgrounds, different situations, different experiences, the reality is you got to build that culture, and you have to make it a priority. And you need to be consistent in, you got to be consistent in the delivery of the things that's going to make that a culture of success. So let me just give you a few things. I'm not going to talk about a lot because we're dealing with this great resignation, and that's an area in space that we deal with a lot in workforce development. And so yeah. And so the thing is this. So the thing about it is, yeah, and yeah, you're right, man. I hear you. But the thing is, when it comes to trying to make this culture a success, there's a few things we need to think about. One, I was recently having a conversation with a customer that we were looking at doing some work together, and that is focusing on how do we react to things within our organization. Are we on edge all the time? Can people even talk to each other? You know what I mean? Is everything something? Like sometimes you have to get a project done, and you're dealing with these different personality styles, and or you may be dealing with a boss that's somewhat domineering, or things like that. But the reality is that are you communicating in a way that's productive and healthy to get the job done? Yeah. Yeah. And so if we're not focusing on how we react to situations, and I'm going to tell you why that's important, because sometimes I see some organizations, and I see some leaders, or I see some staff, and we're not operating like mature adults. We act like children, kids that don't know how to communicate ideas and thoughts without like you said here, Harrison, emotions, being overly emotional. Now, how do you thwart that? How you deal with that? Try some emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is about managing your emotions. How about some what they call self-regulation? Regulating how I respond to situations, considering how that response is going to impact another person. That's great leadership right there. Some of the greatest leaders got that one. I mean, some of the leaders I've met over my lifetime, it's almost like you would think that they don't have a problem in the world and they could have millions. But the reality is how do they respond to it? How do they respond to the situation? That's a whole nother level of leadership. Whole nother level of leadership that most people never make it to. They never make it to this level of leadership because this is the way I see things, and this is the way we're going to do things, and it's just the way it has to be. And then, like, okay, so guess what? You have 20 people here that's disagreeing with you, and you're not even having a conversation with them because you're being emotional instead of logical. How do I communicate my thoughts that are inclusive and bring people involved, get people involved in the conversation? See, I'm going to create a culture of consistency versus one where there's gaps. You got to give people the comfort of knowing that they can, even if they're off to some extent, they have the ability to voice ideas and thoughts. If it's always just do, don't ask questions. Now I know as a leader, sometimes you have certain tasks that have to be, you have to do, and it's going to maybe make people a little uncomfortable. But the reality is, if it's always like that, then people feel less valued. And then what they'll do is, especially during the days of the Great Resignation, they will just bounce. They will go to the next opportunity. They will even downscale and take less, not to deal with that. You see what I'm saying? So it's really important to understand that the goal is consistency, but you have to build consistency in culture by doing certain things. So emotional intelligence, and again, communications, effective communications. When I'm dealing with leaders, I always, pretty much one thing I always recommend, coaching, or if it's just training or whatever we're doing, is that you have an effective a system of regular communications with your team. You can't go 3, 4, 5, 6 months without communicating with them, because then people start to come up with their own thoughts because they're not being told things in an efficient manner. And so what do? They start filling the gaps themselves. So maybe it's a Monday morning huddle call, with a virtual or something like that. But, and then give people a chance to express, all right, challenges and concerns. Sometimes we like to avoid them. We don't want to talk about challenges and concerns, just get the job done. But the reality is, when you got people in the mix, you really want to take the time to hear some of these opinions and thoughts, in particular, the people that are in the trenches. Like I said, I do a lot of work in the workforce development space and the diversity space, and one thing I find is a lot of times, the organizations that seem to be successful are the ones who have a policy in which people feel like their voices are heard, or there's some mode of communication, or some place where you can ask questions and get answers. But when people just feel like, superimpose, do what I tell you, the reality is, it causes some challenges in trying to create a culture that's consistent in how people can, feel engaged and feel inspired and want to get up and go to work every day and things of that nature. So I'm not going to spend much more time on this, but here's the thing. If you want to retain people, get a culture that's consistent in values, consistent in communications, consistent in listening, consistent in, brainstorming ideas to enhance the culture. Because if there's gaps, what happens is people can't, what's our identity? We don't even have a sense of identity. You see, we don't have a sense of identity, and that can hurt your chances of retaining people. Because what happens when that goes down, then the people themselves, the team, start to create stuff. They start to come up with their own ideas as to what is what, instead of the culture defining what is what, or the core values defining what is what. So let's, work on that, and keep that one thing in mind. I've been talking about it a lot recently, but it's so true. The emotional intelligence. The emotional intelligence is one of the most needed studies in today's world, because we're just too overly emotional right now. People are reacting, Facebook, Twitter, getting mad, wars, fighting, politics. Everybody is everywhere right now, my friends. My party, your party, my community, your community, fights, battles, everything. No emotional control right now. There's a bunch of anger. But next level leadership, people who think at another level, understand emotional quotient, emotional control, EI, self-regulation, self-awareness. That's a whole nother level of thinking, that when you have leaders and staff that operate in that mode, that's when you get consistency, because people are checking themselves before they go out and try to check others. And so hopefully, yeah, all right. Yeah, Stephanie, I would love to chat with you about that. Hey, because right now it's necessary. Putting you up there. I like that. When I get these kind of comments that I think make sense, I'll pop them up. So, let me give you my email address. Reach out to me, all right? And we'd love to chat with you about this. And because it's such a need, especially the culture of these organizations, some of them are just becoming so toxic. They're becoming so toxic, and people don't want to work in toxic environments anymore. The pandemic definitely, you know, you know, and so it really boils down to, as a leader, building them. Yep. Yep. And so I appreciate, what you're saying, Harrison, as well. I mean, I take comments, all of them, and the reality is we all have these different experiences. So thank you for your input here. But the reality of it is, when it comes to the culture of an organization, as a leader, put personal feelings to the side and build that culture. You see? Yeah, 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 yeah. So, okay, yeah, I'm reading some of this here. This time, don't mix with the unwarranted beliefs. Okay, got it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and so I'm just reading some of the different comments that are popping up here. And so the reality is here, culture. We can create a culture where people feel like, man, I enjoy being here. Yeah, there's work to do. Yeah, we have deadlines. Yeah, we have processes and systems. But man, we just enjoy each other. We understand why we're doing this. There's a sense of synergy in our interactions with each other. We're not all looking at all of the differences of this and that person comes from there, that person comes from there. When we're working in the organization, we're just a team. We're going to, when you bring people together, you're going to always have differences of opinion from our upbringings. It's just the way it is. We weren't all raised in the same environments, but great leaders know how to find a way to take that hodgepodge and pull it together, man, and say, let's find a way to make this work. You see, I mean, I love that movie years ago. I think it's Remember the Titans, and how that coach had to pull those two groups of folk, the black folks and the white folk from two different worlds, and pull them together to build a winning team. And he was willing to take on all that stuff, challenges, ups and downs, folks' perceptions and opinions. But when it was all said, that team was one. And when that team became one, they won that championship. And so that's what it's really all about. Yeah. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Dr. Damon Williams. Okay, that's good, Stephanie. Thanks for sharing that with me too. I like that. Thank you. These are great resources. And so, um, you know, here I'm going to conclude this. I was supposed to conclude it 5 minutes ago, but I keep going. But let's work on building cultures that make people feel like, yeah, I enjoy being here. This makes sense to me. Maybe we can go from Thank God It's Friday to Thank God It's Monday. That was my book 20 something years ago, How to Find Your Passion. I know ET has been talking about it over the years, but I wrote that on my book 20 something years ago. All right, 20 years ago, How to Find Your Passion, Make a Living at Thank God It's Monday. Because that's when you start knowing that this place where I'm working, I'm feeling it. Or this business that I'm operating, I'm feeling that. Because Monday becomes a moment of joy, not one of disdain. All right. Now, sometimes you may be physically tired, and that's a whole nother story. We all sometimes can need a break. But when we wake up in the morning, we got to wake up saying, this makes sense to me. That's why I've been doing what I've been doing all these years, because it just continues to make sense to me. It's like I could have gone on and, just the corporate thing or taken a job in education. There's a lot of things I could do. But the reality is this just keeps making sense to me because I feel like we're making a difference on the planet. And until that day comes to an end, I'm just going to keep pressing. All right. So that's all we got for today. Hope this information is helpful. Again, our website is coachdspeaks.com. Like I said, just drop in nuggets that can be helpful in your work, career life, and even personal. Take care.